Welcome to Wisdom Time. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly often misunderstood topic, the spiritual risks of certain ascetic diets. We're going to be looking at what happens when people give up animal products, a path a lot of folks take with the absolute best of intentions. So, let's get right into it.
It's a huge question, right? Can giving up things like meat and dairy actually lead to real spiritual growth? I mean, on the surface, it kind of makes sense. You think discipline, purity, compassion. But is it really a recommended path for spiritual development? Well, the answer we're going to explore today is, a lot more complicated than a simple yes or no.
So to really unpack all this, here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the big question. Is this even a real path to enlightenment? Then we'll get into a really crucial difference between two kinds of progress. After that, we get to the serious stuff, the real dangers of trying to do this alone. We'll back that up with what tradition and the scholars teach, before we wrap up with some pretty startling, real-world cautionary tales.
Okay, let's jump into our first section. Is this a genuine path to enlightenment? It seems like a straightforward question, but the answer we find is super specific. And really, it all hinges on one single key idea.
So here's the thing. The answer is yes, a change is definitely possible, but it's defined as metaphysical progress. And this right here, this is the core idea of our whole explainer today. This is not the same thing as religious or spiritual progress. The best way to think about it is like you're developing a powerful new tool. A tool itself isn't good or bad, right? It all depends on how you use it. Understanding that difference is absolutely everything.
So what is the difference, really? How can you make progress that isn't actually good for you spiritually? Let's break down exactly what these two things mean, because this is where the risks, this is where they start to become crystal clear.
What's so interesting here is the contrast. Look at this. On one side, you've got metaphysical progress. This can happen just from changing your diet. That's it. But all it does is enhance what's already inside you, the good stuff and the bad stuff. Then on the other side, you've got religious progress. That requires the right intention, the right guidance to line you up with a safe, established tradition. You see the massive difference, right? One path is totally unsupervised and potentially really dangerous, while the other is a guided, safe path.
And check out this brilliant analogy that makes it all concrete. Think about learning karate. By itself, it's just a physical skill, right? A personal development. It's neutral. But when a soldier learns that exact same skill, but with the intention to protect other people, the whole act is transformed. It becomes something praiseworthy. The very same principle applies here. Without the right intention, the right framework, this kind of diet is just a physical thing you're doing, not a spiritual journey.
And that brings us to the most serious part of this whole discussion, the very clear warnings about going it alone. The guidance on this is incredibly direct about the risks you run when you walk this path without a proper guide.
And just to be clear, this isn't some new age concern. We are talking about absolute giants of Islamic scholarship and spirituality. Figures like Shah of Naqshband, Imam Rabbani, and Bediuzzaman Said Nursi. All of them gave the exact same warning. Never do this on your own. When you have a warning that is that consistent across centuries from people of this stature, you've really got to take it seriously.
But why? What is the actual mechanism here that makes this practice so dangerous without a supervisor? How can a simple change in what you eat lead to such potential harm?
Okay, so here's the fascinating and kind of scary mechanism behind it all. The practice basically acts like a powerful cleanser for your inner world. It strips away all the mental noise, all the distractions, and that allows for an incredible, laser-like focus. But here's the catch. It makes you lock on to whatever your strongest pre-existing tendency is, and then it just amplifies that one trait until it completely takes over your whole personality.
So what does this amplification effect actually look like in the real world? Well, take someone who's already a little bit arrogant. They go into this practice, and they don't come out humble. No, they come out fully 100% convinced of their own supreme importance. Or what about someone who's naturally anxious? Their fear gets magnified and magnified until they become, and these are the blunt words from the source, a crazy paranoid. The practice essentially takes the little seed of who you are and grows it into this giant, overwhelming, totally unbalanced tree.
So, given all these pretty serious dangers, it really makes you ask, what does the core tradition actually teach? Let's take a look at the primary sources of Islam and see what the guidance is there.
And the guidance here is actually very clear, because of what's missing. There are simply no recommendations, not in the Qur'an, not in the Sunnah, which is the example and practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him,
to avoid animal products as some kind of path to being more pious. It's just not there.
In fact, a lot of the evidence actually points in the complete opposite direction. There are tons of accounts where the Prophet, peace be upon him, didn't just show that he liked meat, but he would even ask, when other food was served, was there no meat? That shows a clear preference, definitely not an avoidance.
And this all leads to a really powerful, logical conclusion. I mean, think about it. If this practice was an unconditionally good thing for everybody to do, it would have been a part of the Prophet's established practice, the Sunnah. The fact that it isn't, well, that's incredibly telling, isn't it?
And finally, let's look at what happens when these warnings are ignored. These are not just theoretical dangers, okay? These are real-world consequences, documented by people who saw them happen firsthand. And hey, by the way, if you're finding this explainer valuable, now would be a great time to subscribe to our channel, like our video, and turn on that notification bell.
This first example is, wow, it's really stark. There was a student who did this practice all on his own, and his self-perception was amplified so much that he became convinced he was the Mahdi, the prophesied redeemer of Islam. And this wasn't just a fleeting thought, it led to long-term psychiatric treatment that, tragically, couldn't even fully resolve his delusion.
The second story is just as startling. Another person, after doing the same unsupervised practice, came to believe he was none other than one of history's most revered saints, Abdul Qadir Jilani.
And what's truly haunting is what this person actually said. His own words were, "When I think logically, it seems impossible, but I am also sure that I am Jilani." Just let that sink in for a second. His rational mind knew it was absurd, but the delusion that the practice created was so powerful it just completely overrode his logic.
And that leaves us with this final crucial question, one that really wraps up everything we've talked about today. In our search for growth, we often think that being sincere and putting in the effort is all that matters. But as this whole exploration shows, maybe sincerity without the right guidance isn't just ineffective, maybe it can be profoundly dangerous. It's something to think about.